Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Felixstowe Matters. Now you know that normally everything goes very smoothly, but unfortunately this week we seem to have had a couple of people not come in, and the visitor who was going to come in today, it was the RBS Bank, and it was going to be very interesting because, as you know, the RBS are in the news at the moment, and I thought, well, we're going to have a real ball talking to them about interest rate and all sorts of things I wanted to raise with them. But unfortunately, at the last minute, we got an email and saying they couldn't make it. But we'll hope we'll have that another time. But today, I'm going to welcome Bonnie Collins, and she's had a most interesting life. And welcome, Bonnie. It's lovely to have you. Lovely to have you with us. Now, Bonnie, you're a country girl at heart, I hear.
I am a really rural country Suffolk girl.
And tell me something about your childhood.
I grew up in farms in Suffolk my
Yes.
entire life until I was 14.
Really?
We finally moved to a small Suffolk town then.
And this was because your father was...
He was a pig hand. He
pig
left school.
hand?
Yes,
That's
what it was
an interesting
called.
occupation.
Yes, yeah, he left school.
They used to call them pig men as well,
Yes,
didn't
they did. Yes, yeah. Pig hand is slightly more politically correct.
Is it? Oh, I see. Yes.
But yeah, he left school. He went to agricultural college near Norwich.
Yes.
And he worked on the farms my whole life.
Gosh, that's
knows his stuff about pigs, that's for sure.
So you grew up with animals?
Constantly.
Yes. And did you stay on one farm, or did you go from farm to farm?
We moved around in my early years. We moved to 2 or 3 different farms. Farming was changing in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yes.
So yeah, we moved around a little bit, and then sort of mid-80s we settled, and that's where we stayed till the mid-90s when we finally moved to a town.
That's very good.
So, yeah.
But the pigs, you say with the pigs, I was very concerned about these poor pigs because they have so many of these pigs, and they're all in these little pens, and the poor pigs can't turn round. To me, that's dreadful,
I mean, it's a very interesting topic because actually, as my father still works, although he's now works in agricultural software, he does a lot of work with the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yes.
And they are working on these pens because obviously to the untrained person they can seem very inhumane.
Yes.
But there is a good reason why the pens are so small.
Yes.
Because the infant mortality rate in piglets and weaners, as they call them, is very, very high if you allow the sow to walk around freely. She will lay on them. She doesn't know what she's doing.
But when you say walk around freely, this is in their little pen.
Yes.
If it's a slightly bigger pen, so they can turn round.
What happens is those little pens do have a slightly bigger area to them, and the piglets go into their little den, and the doors are shut off several times a day, and the sow is allowed to come out and have a walk around for a bit. So although it can seem quite cruel, actually it's to save piglets because farmers wouldn't have the turnaround that they do of piglets and pigs if they didn't use that technology.
So this is really a form of pig factory farming.
Which is actually a concept my dad is trying to get across to farmers, is that actually pig farms are factories in some way and they have a production line, and that we need to think of it more that way, but actually adjust the measures that are used. So he is working on a frame that will be more, you will have more room for the sow, but still keep this infant mortality rate down.
But of course, you know, there's a way of pig farming where you don't get these problems. You have it outside. You have a nice 10-acre field. You put a lot of nice little huts in it. You put 2 or 3 sows in each hut. They've got the freedom to go where they want. They don't kill their babies. They don't lie on them, and they produce beautiful. The only problem is that poor old farmer, he can only produce perhaps 200 pigs, whereas doing it in pens and they produce 1,000.
Yes, exactly.
And so there you've got to weigh up sort of.
It is for the farmers, especially with how difficult farming has become in this country over the last sort of couple of decades. It does mean that as nice as it is to do the outdoor farming, which we do have quite a lot of in Suffolk, they do still have to have their units on the farm itself. So it's kind of, they have to have a balance of the two. But who knows, one day the technology may be advanced enough that they can.
This is the thing, isn't it? And what other animals did you have?
We had sheep, which were my favourite. We didn't have many.
No.
They were pests at times. They liked to run away and eat things and generally cause trouble. But
they were kept more as pets rather than.
They were. We had them from lambs.
Yes.
And we'd rear them, hand rear them.
Yes.
So they were more pets.
Yes.
And we had chickens.
And people don't realise with sheep, if you have them tame, they're bullies.
They are.
And they'll go around, they'll chase the dogs, they'll chase anything. You know, I mean,
I remember
unbelievable.
one day my sheep was bullying me and he bit my favourite pair of socks and put a hole in it.
No,
I never
really?
forgave him for that.
Oh dear. No, people don't realise what. But I mean, I go back to the days when sheep were a real problem.
Yeah,
they used to be full. I don't know whether in your day they used to have these little lice things, not lice. They used to burrow into the skin.
Ticks.
And no, the horrible things right inside.
Oh,
and you
yes,
had to press either side and pull them out practically with a pair of tweezers.
Yeah.
And they were covered with them. And this is why they're dipped, to get rid of that.
Yeah.
So I think they've improved the chemicals. So they probably don't have so much now. But my days, I've got some fond memories of farming.
I can imagine.
So, and you had chickens and
chickens, ducks. And we lived near cow farms.
Yes.
And often you'd get a call sort of in the middle of the night to say the cows had got out onto marshland, and everybody would have to go and help round them all up and bring them back to I remember once my mum was doing the washing up and she said to my dad, why is there a cow in our garden? And of course they got out and we had to go and round them all up. So always good fun.
Cows can be a problem. But
they can,
as a boy, of course, in the war, I actually used to milk. But it was a herd of 40. I used to milk a herd of 40 and then cycle to school, come back from school, then milk the herd of 40 again. But it was lovely in the morning and cuddle up on a cold day up to the
cows are
and
quite
we used to hand milk them. I've still got the action, you know, with me. What's it? And of course, as a boy, I used to turn it round and do a squirt into my. But they're lovely and warm. The trouble was the kickers. They kick you when you're sitting there on a stool milking them, hand milking them. And so we used to either have to put a rope round their leg to stop them kicking, or we used to put a rope round their middle and tie it up so that they couldn't kick. But it was an experience. People don't realise now they put on these machines. Away they
miss
go.
all of that.
They miss all of that. So what was your sort of overall impression of your country girl upbringing?
I enjoy the countryside massively. It has a huge bearing on where we live now, because I married a town boy. And we lived in the town initially, but I didn't enjoy it. I missed the countryside. It's always been a big part. I have at the moment we have 6 cats and 2 dogs. 2 of the cats, as their kittens, are off tomorrow to a new home.
They really are.
So it's their last day with us today. I will miss them.
Yes.
But yeah, I've always had animals as a grown-up too.
Yeah.
They're a big part of life.
There's a big,
as you can see, they give you friendship and they don't answer back.
Well,
actually, I'll take that back.
She lets us know exactly what she bullies everybody. She does indeed. And how did you fit in schooling with all of this?
Schooling was fantastic. Rural countryside schooling. I really.
What's
amazing.
The difference then? What makes
smaller schools?
Of course, that's
my primary school had a total of 50 students.
50, gosh,
my
that's
first
good,
primary
isn't it?
school in the whole
and that
school.
Was how many classes?
2. It was split into
2 classes.
So you had the juniors and then the seniors.
Oh, lovely! So you really
grew
up
it was
together,
brilliant.
didn't
and still to this day, some of those people, although I moved off to different schools, we're still in contact.
Isn't that lovely?
And it was such a lovely. I have such fond memories of it and quite vivid memories of that.
That's right. Yeah.
We then moved to a bigger primary school, which was still rural, and I still have very fond memories of. And then went on to a rural high school, which had a total of 300 students.
300 students?
Yeah, that was it.
Total? That's not bad, is it?
So the classes again were smaller.
Small, isn't it?
Everybody bonded. The teachers could teach what they needed to. And then
you formed a relationship with the teachers like that.
Yes, definitely. And then moving on, we moved to the town, and then I had to go to a bigger rural school, which actually had over 1,500 students, which was a massive culture shock.
It would be
to go from a school that had very few students to a lot of students, and although it was a very good school, I didn't enjoy it the same.
No.
Because
when you get that huge number, it's very difficult.
Scary.
I understand that it's only possible for a teacher or a headmaster to remember between 200 and 300 names.
I can imagine.
And so that means the headmaster can't remember every name of every child in the school, so it must make a difference. He just sees a lot of faces instead of seeing a lot of personalities. So what was your basic impression then of large schools and small schools?
I preferred the small schools.
Absolutely, yes.
I enjoyed education. I miss it. I wish I was still in it, to be honest.
Yes.
So yeah, the smaller schools meant that you could knuckle down and get on with things. There was a lot less disruption in class because you had less children to be disruptive.
Of course, yes.
And yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it. Then I got to the bigger school.
Yes.
And it was much more diverse. People there, you know, it's very different. You know,
did
bigger
you come
towns.
out with any qualifications?
I did. I have 9 GCSEs.
9, gosh, that's very good.
And 3 A levels.
Gosh, that's very good.
The lowest grade I got was 1C. I actually went home for my GCSEs and told my mum I'd failed them all. Because to me, to get a C was it, I'd failed.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That's very good going, though. That is good going. So what age did you leave school?
18.
Then? 18.
Yeah.
So then what did you do? You left school at 18.
I did, and I decided... Well, originally I wanted to go and be an English teacher in Germany.
An English teacher in Germany? Why Germany?
When I was about 10, 11, my auntie got married and she had a German pen pal that she'd had from school, from childhood.
Yes.
And this German pen pal came to the wedding.
Yes.
And one of the people that
came to the wedding? Whose wedding?
Of my auntie.
Oh, your auntie's wedding, yes.
One of the people I've always taken inspiration from is Audrey Hepburn. She's such a beautiful lady, so well dressed. And this Doris, this German pen pal, turned up and she was Audrey Hepburn in person.
That's lovely, yeah.
Absolutely stunning, beautiful things.
Yes.
And from then on, she'd write to me and she'd always send me Christmas presents. So I became quite interested in Germany and German, and which is why I took German A level.
Yes.
And I wanted to go out there, and I met Jake.
And that's once you met Jake.
I met Jake at college, and that was it.
Well, we'll talk about Jake in a minute. But coming back to the farming, we've talked about the animals.
Yeah.
What about the arable?
Oh, that was one of the... We did wheat and barley.
Wheat and barley, yes.
As a child, you don't think as an adult what a field of wheat could mean. As a child, obviously as it grows, there's the stages of it growing, which is quite exciting when you're young. And then you've got harvest, and we would get to sit in the combine harvester in the cockpit.
Of course, people don't realise the size of these combine harvesters. They're absolutely huge. Yes.
And they would harvest through the night, obviously to make the most of the good weather.
Yes.
And at night you would have the lights coming down from the combine harvester, and all you could see around you was this sea of wheat.
Amazing.
And the front going round and round.
Yes.
Just mesmerising.
Yes.
And really exciting.
Did you actually drive it yourself? Or?
I didn't get to drive it, but we always sat on that seat.
Side, yes.
But also, once harvesting was done and they'd baled everything, or even once they'd just harvested, we used to go into the fields and make little houses from the bales or from the straw. So actually there's a lot that you could get from a field of wheat as a child.
Of course, the combine harvesting changed the face of farming, because in the old days, of course, you used to take them, put them all in sheaves, and then those would be carted back and you build big stacks, and then the big event of the farming year was when the thresher came, and they'd bring the thresher up, and everyone got involved then. It was a tremendous thing, but of course it's much more practical to have a combine harvest, does it all in one go, and bingo, that's it. People don't realise how much farming
it really has
changed.
Evolved.
I don't know whether it's changed for the better. It's more economical.
Yes,
but it was more fun, I think, doing it the old way.
Definitely.
But and so you had wheat and barley. So barley, I don't know anything about barley.
I don't know a huge amount. I know it's used in alcohol a lot.
That's a good point, isn't it? Coming back, we left school at 18, and then. You did what?
I went into caring, what at that point was auxiliary nursing, which is now healthcare assistant.
Yes. So when you say caring, this was caring for the elderly
to start
with. I see, yes.
Which was an eye-opener. Because
in what way?
When you're young and you look at older people, you don't always understand them so much. You haven't spent enough time. You have your grandparents. But these were much older. My grandparents were quite young.
Yes.
And it allowed me to connect with people I wouldn't have connected with, who were someone's mother, someone's sister, someone's aunt, uncle, grandmother. And it gave me a real appreciation for people.
Yes.
And as they get older, you know that they are still people.
Yes, well, this is the important thing.
It was really important.
How big was the care home?
There were about 30 residents in the care home I went and worked in. And I had a good time. It was. There were difficult times, but a lot of the time we had a lot of fun. People don't realise. You get this idea that care homes for the elderly must be really dreary places. old people have wicked senses of humour.
Oh, absolutely.
They really, truly do, and we had some fantastic times with them.
But when I've investigated these a bit, one of the things that's worried me, and I don't know whether your experience tallies with this, is that the degree of medication that's used in care homes, because it keeps the residents quiet. This is how it used to be. I don't know whether it's still that way.
I think they can be. The problem was care homes, obviously in the 90s, they became privatised. And so the staff sort of changed from being national health staff to being private staff. And I think in any profession there will always be a degree of people who will not be as caring as the others and may do those kind of things. Fortunately, the homes that I worked in, most certainly the staff I worked with genuinely cared, and I didn't come across
big
that.
Thing, isn't it?
But I do think of course it's out there, because there are always going to be those that unfortunately don't care enough.
It's a shame.
People can become quite jaded.
Yes, but mind you, the elderly can be very difficult.
Yes,
especially if they've got one or two of these horrible things that happen to the elderly. It
takes a lot of compassion and understanding.
It does, and a good carer is well worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
So at any rate, you went through your care period. How long did you do that for?
I did that until I think 2001, 2002, I believe.
Yes.
I ended up at the hospital after doing the care homes, and did some time there as an agency. Healthcare assistant, so that I could go on different wards.
Oh, I see.
And I worked on the cancer ward, I worked on the stroke ward, I worked on the orthopaedic ward, all the different wards you got to work on because you chose where you went.
Oh, I see.
So that was quite good.
Which ward appealed to you most?
I think I enjoyed the orthopaedic ward the most.
Really? What did that involve?
It was things like amputees, breakages, those kind of things, and they really needed your help.
Yes.
Not because they wanted it really, and so it made it quite interesting. It did. The care that you had to give them, and thinking about the individual, and their independence and what this meant to them, and coming to terms with what they were going through. So it meant you really had to get to know the person and make sure you were looking after them in the right way.
Because this is an opening for a lot of youngsters today, isn't it? They're always asking for help. They need people to come in and train. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And I mean, would you recommend that as a way of life?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, now there's so much training available for it as well.
Yes.
So it is a really good career to get into.
Yes. Now let's come on to Jake.
Okay.
Because you met Jake at 18. He was your first boyfriend. He was
my first boyfriend.
My word, isn't it? And of course, I must mention that you're married to Jake now.
I am now.
He's a lovely man. I'm full of admiration of Jake.
Thank you.
But tell us a little bit about the romance. It's lovely.
I'm not sure if it was romance.
Oh, I'm sure it was romance.
We met not long after I'd moved to Ipswich. We were both at the college there.
Yes.
And he happened to know a girl that I was living with. And we had a shared flat.
Yes.
And he came over to visit. And then later that evening he rang the flat, and I said, "Oh, Caroline's not here."
Yes.
And he said, "Oh, I didn't ring up for her." And I said, "Oh, what did you ring for then?" And his famous words, and this is where I say there's no romance, were, "My mum and none of my friends wanted to go out tonight, so my mum said I should ring you up and ask you out instead."
It came out wrongly, I'm sure that did. Yeah.
He meant well.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was it. 16 years later. We've been married for almost 9 years actually.
Yes.
Took him a while to ask me to marry him.
Oh, see, what happened there then? How did he propose?
It was Christmas Eve.
Yes. Christmas Eve, well, that's lovely.
2002.
That's nice, yes.
And we were staying in a hotel in Halesworth, where my family lived. And I found a little ring on my pillow.
Oh,
he had previously asked me the previous New Year's Eve. I think I've told you this story.
No, tell it
off the cuff, he said, "Oh, you'd say yes, wouldn't you? Typical New Year's Eve. Had a few too many." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You'd say yes, wouldn't you?" I said, "What to?" And he said, "Well, I asked you to marry me." And that was that. And then for a year I didn't hear anything. And then of course this following year
you found this ring on your pillow. How lovely, isn't that nice?
So,
yes. Well, that's the nearest approach to myself.
I know.
I've never asked my wife to marry me. It was all taken for granted. But we've been together we're married for 64 years now.
So it must work then.
Must work.
I think this lack of romance must keep it going, because we're always waiting for the day you get more romantic.
Oh, I don't know. I believe to be successful, you've got to court your wife every day of your life.
It's very true.
I never go out without bringing something back for her. We still kiss each other, and we still do everything, and it's. I think you've got to do it all your life.
Definitely,
and, there's no question about that. But then run and get on to it. So then, after that period, your nursing period, what did you go on to?
I took a break because I think sometimes with the caring profession, if you're a caring person, it can become a bit much, and you need a bit of a break. So I went and took a job as a PA.
As a PA, personal assistant?
Yeah, I started out as a divisional administrator, but within a few days became a PA.
That's very good. And what sort of firm was that?
That was for a conservatory firm.
Conservatory firm, yes.
So it's quite interesting because you dealt with sort of the different branches, and you dealt with the telesales people.
Gosh, that's very good.
You had to have a good sense of humour to work there.
Well, tell me the difference between a conservatory and a glass house or greenhouse.
Obviously, a greenhouse you don't need any form of planning permission for.
Oh, I see. A greenhouse you don't.
Yes, and greenhouses are standalone structures.
Yes.
Usually single glazed, very easy to put together. Whereas a conservatory, you may need some planning permissions for.
Yes.
You're going to need foundations.
It's really rather like an extension, isn't it?
It is
to
an
the
extension
house,
of your home.
This is why
you can
need
have
the
them built as freestanding. I know a lot of people now
see.
use them for swimming pools at their
I
homes.
See.
But generally speaking, people do have them as an extension of their home.
I see.
Whereas a greenhouse is something you have.
It's just something you stick up and
generally not the size of a conservatory either.
Oh no, they're small, aren't they? Yes. On the internet, you can buy them for £200 or £300. That's right. Yes. Whereas a conservatory, they can go up to anything up to 20,000, 30,000
easily.
Yes. Yes. But and of course, there are a lot of people who do the conservatories. There's a lot of competition, and I think this is why you have to shop around if you want a conservatory. This is the big thing.
And I mean, when we had, because the house that we bought in Trimley had single glazing and old wooden frames when we first moved in.
Yes.
It's a big house. It was very cold. So we did have to get double glazing, and we did shop around. And I have to say, we eventually went with a local small company because they are actually more competitive than these big companies, and they give you fantastic service.
Yes, no, there's a lot of advertising, but that all has to be paid for, unfortunately. So I've always said, you're in Felixstowe, buy from Felixstowe. It's a very good thing. We've got some very good tradespeople in Felixstowe.
Definitely.
But we actually, once before, we've done a feature on double glazing. It was very interesting. I learnt a lot, I must say. I won't go into double glazing now. So how long were you at the PA for?
Only about a year or so.
I see. What made you give that up?
I got bored.
You got bored? Oh,
I enjoy the organisation side of office life and all the rest of it, but I kind of missed the caring still. I was still sort of in that mindset at that point.
Yes.
So,
you like helping people.
I do, yeah.
So what did you do when you...
I became a youth worker.
A youth worker? Now that's really a jump, isn't it? So...
Yeah, it was just something I wanted to do, somewhere I wanted to go, and it was an opportunity that came up.
Yes. So what was the opportunity that came up?
To be a nighttime youth worker at a housing project. Yeah.
Well, see, when you say a housing project, what do you mean?
It's in Ipswich, actually. It's called the Foyer. I think we have one similar in Felixstowe now. And there was 43 young people living under one roof.
Oh, it's sort of like a hostel type of thing.
Yeah, but
is this for youngsters who've been in trouble, or just youngsters?
There was a broad spectrum. There were those that were troubled. There were those that had difficult backgrounds, so needed somewhere. There were also those who maybe had come to the county to study and were struggling with finding student digs. So often we'd have those too. It's quite a
There was a broad spectrum of it.
Yeah,
and how many staff were there looking after these?
At night time there'd be 2 or 3 of us.
Yes, after 40 youngsters.
Yes, yeah.
Gosh, that's,
during the day there were a lot more staff around because of the level of support they offered.
That's right, yes.
But yeah, at night time there was 2 or 3 of us.
Did you have any trouble with...
Occasionally.
What sort of troubles did you have?
You'd have them come in a bit too drunk and maybe kick off a little bit.
Yes.
You'd have them trying to sneak... One of my favourite stories is a young lad was trying to sneak a friend up to his room.
Oh dear. When you say a friend of the opposite sex,
No. This was
just a friend.
Another friend
yes,
who shouldn't have been on the premises at that time because obviously they had rules, and we had CCTV, and going up the stairs, I could see this young man, but from the backs of his knees, I could see some legs poking out.
Oh dear.
And that was quite funny, because obviously we go up to the room and we say, "Where's your friend?" "What friend?" "Well, either you've got extra legs, or where's your friend?"
Yes.
And so that was quite amusing.
Yes.
And there's sort of the times where you'd catch them out on things.
Yes.
Generally speaking, though, they would always end up laughing about it.
Well,
it never got
thing,
to the point where you were worried, because they knew they'd been caught, and they would just give up and say, "Oh, sorry."
Can I mention the horrendous work, drugs?
Yes.
Did you have drug problems?
Always. That's always going to be an issue with young people. I don't think people realise in Suffolk how much of an issue it is.
Yes.
And how stretched the services that deal with that are.
Tell us a little bit about it, because...
Obviously, there are various different drugs.
Yes.
You start with the softer things like cannabis.
Yes.
But obviously, a lot of youngsters get bored with that after a while. Cannabis isn't physically addictive, but it is psychologically addictive.
Is it? I see. But what effect does it have on one?
It can make them quite sleepy.
Yes.
It makes them very chilled out.
Yes.
So they almost feel like they need... If you're struggling in life and you feel maybe angry, or they can use it as a way of calming themselves down. It's not the answer, I must say. No. It does also make them very hungry. I remember one youngster... we actually had to search his room on suspicion of cannabis.
Yes.
We didn't find any cannabis, but we did find that his drawers didn't contain clothes, but they did contain 24 packs of Walker's crisps. No. Lots of them.
Yes. Oh, goodness. So it makes them hungry. That's
very hungry. Yeah, they get what we call the munchies. So you could always sort of tell when someone was had been smoking cannabis.
But where did he get the money to buy the drugs?
I dread to think. Obviously, they get their benefits.
Yes, but that's not going to cover the cost of.
No, and that is why, unfortunately, people start to turn to crime, or they start to deal the drugs themselves.
Oh, I see.
A lot of people don't realise the main dealers need lots of little dealers to go out, because the people who make the big money off it, they're not the ones going out there selling it.
I see.
They sell it to smaller groups of people who then go on and sell it to the public.
See.
So it's very easy for youngsters to get caught up in that at that point, and it is sad.
But
it's quite
cannabis sounds sort of naughty, but it's not so bad. What is the difficult one?
Well, at the time we had a lot of ketamine, which is a horse tranquiliser.
Horse tranquiliser, what does that do to them?
I don't know myself what it does.
That's not the one that causes hallucinations, is it?
No, I think ketamine just gives them a bit of buzz, makes them enjoy life, everything seems wonderful. Very similar to sort of ecstasy and those kind of things, speed but that was definitely quite rife. The problem you've got now, though, is years ago drugs were very expensive.
Yes.
And they weren't so easy to get hold of.
Yes.
Nowadays they are cut with so many other things, even silly things like talcum powder, which actually can be quite harmful to you.
Add talcum powder into the drug.
And this is why years ago you'd buy a pill for sort of 15, 20, 25 pounds.
Goodness.
They can buy them from £1 now.
Really?
But they need, whereas years ago they'd take one for a night out.
Yes.
Nowadays they might take 5, 6, 7.
Oh dear.
So it's quite a dangerous area for them.
I did an interview this week with a couple of our volunteers, and there was one. She's now completely off them.
Yeah.
But she was telling me that the big problem with drugs is that it's not so much they enjoy them and they have them, but afterwards they feel so dreadful that come down, or whatever it's called something's got a name to it, I think. Yeah. They feel so awful that and it can go on for 2 or 3 days apparently.
Yeah, I think most of the time it's not actually the come down with a lot of people who are addicted to drugs. It is having to face life.
Oh, I see.
That is the problem. Come downs aren't nice.
I know, but what she said was that because you've gone through a day of this dreadful, and then the next day is the same, they take the drug again to get rid of the effect.
Yeah.
And that by doing that, it's a continuous cycle. So once you take one, even the first time, you can sort of get on that bandwagon, which is a great danger.
I think I'd probably argue a bit differently. So I haven't worked with people who have been and had quite a bit of experience. I do think, although there is that element of it, it isn't a major part of why they continue to take them. A lot of it is the underlying issues as to why they've taken them in the first place.
Yes.
You get very few people who get addicted to drugs for no particular reason.
Really? Who
get addicted for the drug
it's
itself.
It's not the peer pressure that does it?
No. I would say with most people there is a real true reason as to why, underlying issues.
What do you put it down to?
People who find it difficult to deal with life's troubles.
Yes.
People who have come from troubled backgrounds.
Yes.
Even people who've come from seemingly normal backgrounds but actually struggle to deal with day-to-day life itself.
Yes. Yes.
And the responsibilities we face as adults.
Yes.
Drugs and alcohol are an escape mechanism.
I suppose so, yes.
So it is,
Well, it's very sad. Now, I've got a whole, still loads and loads to talk to you about. I think we'll have to do this another time, Bonnie. So it's been fascinating talking to you. I'm afraid time is up, which it always comes up. It just doesn't it? But we'll have to carry on with this, I think, another time.
Fantastic.
And thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for telling us all about your beginning. I always think of you now as a country girl with the animals, which is very good. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that as much as I have. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you. Now, don't forget, over the weekend, I think there's a youngsters program on Saturday, and we've got a religious program on Sunday. This is at 10 o'clock. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.